What would you do if the most feared mafia boss in Seoul realized he had lost the only woman he had ever loved? Not to death, not to betrayal, but to his own silence. Kang Min-jae had buried men without blinking. He had signed off on blood debts over whiskey. He had stood in rooms full of powerful men who trembled when he adjusted his cufflinks. But on a rain-soaked evening in Hanam-dong, with cathedral bells rolling over the city and white flowers lining the stairs of a private chapel, Kang Min-jae stopped breathing for the first time in 10 years. Because at the end of the aisle stood Zara Bennett, not in mourning, not in danger, not in his house, in white. And beside her stood another man. Dr. Elias Han placed one steady hand over Zara's trembling fingers as the minister opened the leather book and the guests rose in silence. Min-jae stood at the very back of the chapel, hidden beneath shadow, his black coat still wet from the rain. No one dared ask him to leave. No one dared ask why the devil of Seoul had come to a wedding. Then the minister asked the question that shattered something ancient inside him. If anyone has a reason this union should not proceed. Min-jae looked at Zara. Just once, just long enough for her eyes to find his. And in those eyes, for the first time in all the years she had known him, she saw it. Not command, not calculation, not restraint. Love. Too late, too naked, too late. Zara's breath caught. Elias followed her gaze and turned. His expression did not harden. He did not flinch. He only looked at the man in black at the back of the chapel, the man every paper in Korea described in euphemisms and legal lies, the man the underworld called Chairman Kang when they were afraid, an executioner when they weren't being polite. For 3 heartbeats, the entire church held still. Min-jae could have stopped the wedding with one word. He had stopped shipments, stopped elections, stopped men's hearts. But he did not stop this, because this was the first thing in his life he understood he no longer had the right to touch. He lowered his gaze, turned, and walked back out into the rain. But the story did not begin in that church. It began 4 years earlier, on a winter night with blood on polished marble, a broken violin, and a woman who looked at the most dangerous man in Seoul like he was still human. Her name was Zara Bennett, and Kang Min-jae had loved her from the first night she walked into his empire. He just never said it. 4 years earlier, Zara Bennett was not wearing silk or diamonds. She was wearing a charcoal coat 2 sizes too big, cheap gloves with a split seam at the thumb, and the stubborn expression of someone who had already decided the world would not get to pity her. Her mother had been Ghanaian. Her father had been British Korean, an art historian who spent more time recovering stolen antiquities than keeping himself safe. When Zara was 19, both of them died within 11 months of each other. Her mother to illness. Her father to a suspicious car accident no one ever proved was accidental. What he left behind was not money. It was debt, a handful of journals, and a warning written across the inside cover of one leather notebook. If anything happens to me, never trust the men smiling around priceless things. At 26, Zara worked 3 jobs in Seoul. By day, she cataloged damaged antiques for a private conservation house. By evening, she translated restoration contracts. At night, when her rent came due faster than hope, she played violin in hotel lounges where rich men talked over her music. That was where Kang Min-jae first saw her. The Imperial Crescent Hotel had rented out its top ballroom for a black tie charity auction. The papers would describe it as an evening for cultural preservation. Men like Min Jae understood it for what it was: a laundering table dressed in tuxedos, paintings, jade seals, temple relics, colonial maps, objects passed from hand to hand under the language of philanthropy, while real ownership moved invisibly beneath the surface. Min Jae had not wanted to attend, but his father, Kang Du-sik, still lived then, and when Kang Du-sik gave instructions, even sharks learned manners. So Min Jae stood in a tailored black suit at the back of the ballroom, face unreadable, drink untouched, while donors lied beautifully into microphones. Then the violin stopped. Not gradually, abruptly. A single sharp scrape cut across the room, followed by silence. Every head turned. One of the hotel staff had stumbled backward into Zara, snapping the bridge of her violin against a tray stand. The instrument dropped to the floor with a crack that echoed harder than it should have. The room gave the accident the polite cruelty wealthy rooms always give accidents. A few smiles, a few lowered eyes, one or two people pretending not to enjoy the humiliation. Zara crouched immediately, scooping the broken instrument into both hands as if it were a body. The hotel manager hissed from the side, "Move, we'll replace you." Replace you. As if she were not a person but a lamp. That was when Min Jae moved. He crossed the ballroom without hurry. Men instinctively stepped aside. Women who knew his face looked away first. He stopped in front of Zara. She rose halfway, still holding the broken violin to her chest. Up close, she expected arrogance, or worse, pity. Instead, the man in front of her said, very quietly, "Who broke it?" The room chilled. The manager began to stammer. "Chairman Kang, it was an accident." Min Jae did not look at him. He looked only at Zara. "Who?" he asked again. "Broke it?" She blinked. No one had asked her that in years. Not like it mattered. "It doesn't matter," she said. His eyes shifted then, finally, to the manager. "It matters." The manager's face drained. By the end of the night, the hotel had paid for a master repair specialist, triple Zara's contract fee, and permanent reimbursement for the original instrument's value if restoration failed. That should have been the end. It wasn't. Because when the auction concluded, a curator quietly approached Zara near the service hall and pressed a card into her hand. No logo, no title, just a name, Kang Min Jae, and an address in Yongsan where no ordinary business operated. 2 days later, Zara found herself standing outside a brutalist building overlooking the river, its mirrored windows too dark to read, security too discreet to be legal. She was escorted through 3 locked doors, an elevator without buttons, and a corridor lined not with art, but with objects under conservation. Bronze Buddhas, lacquer chests, Yosean scroll fragments, and ceremonial daggers recovered from private collections no museum would ever publicly admit existed. At the end of the corridor, Kang Min Jae stood alone in a climate-controlled archive room wearing rolled sleeves and black gloves, examining a damaged folding screen with the concentration of a surgeon. He looked different without the ballroom. More dangerous, more tired. "You came," he said. "You asked," Zara replied. One corner of his mouth moved, almost a smile, almost nothing. "I need a conservator," he said. "Temporary." She looked around the room. "For stolen art?" His gaze lifted slowly to hers. Most people would have folded under that gaze. Zara didn't. "That depends," he said. "On who's asking?" She should have walked out. Instead, she said, "That depends on whether you want the truth or a cleaner invoice." That was the moment, though neither of them knew it then. Not when he hired her. Not when she signed the NDA thick enough to bury a government. Not when she began spending 6 days a week inside his fortress of secrets. But later, Min-jae would think of that line again and again. Whether you want the truth. Because truth had never been the problem. Courage was. There were two Kang Min-jaes. The one the city knew was a legend built from legal fear. Chairman Kang. Heir to the Daesung network, investor, broker. Power behind foundation boards and construction contracts and quiet political disappearances. Then there was the man Zara came to know. The one who remembered the exact humidity required to flatten warped silk. The one who drank coffee black and too cold because he forgot it was there. The one who never raised his voice in the archive room. The one who read the provenance notes she wrote in the margins and corrected dates in pencil because he could not stand factual sloppiness. He was ruthless everywhere else, but around damaged things, old paper, cracked lacquer, broken gold leaf, he was precise almost to tenderness. That contradiction undid her more than charm ever could have. At first, their relationship was strictly professional. Zara came in at 7:30, reviewed shipment inventories, restored pieces too politically sensitive to send to public labs, translated correspondence from London, Accra, and Kyoto. Min-jae appeared and vanished like weather. Some days he spent hours beside her, gloved hands steady over ledgers and preservation trays. Some days she did not see him at all, and only felt him in the security shifts. Doors unlocking 1 second faster, tea appearing beside her elbow before she realized she was hungry. Cars already waiting downstairs when the rain came. He never asked personal questions. Not directly. But he noticed everything. The first time he sent a driver to take her home, she refused. The second time he sent two. The third time, when she asked how he knew her subway line had become unsafe after midnight due to a gang dispute 3 stations down, he said without looking up from a shipment manifest, "Because I make it my business to know what can harm people under my roof. People under my roof." Such a cold sentence. Such an intimate one. Zara tried not to feel what she was beginning to feel. It made no sense. Men like Kang Min-jae did not belong to women like her. Men like Kang Min-jae barely belonged to themselves. Still, there were moments. One night the power dipped during a thunderstorm, and emergency lighting turned the archive blue. Zara reached automatically for a porcelain ritual bowl balanced on the edge of a work table. So did Min-jae. Their hands touched. His hand was warm despite the cold room. Neither moved at first. The generator kicked in a second later, but something had already changed. He let go first, not abruptly, carefully, as if even withdrawing from her required control. Another evening, she stayed too late, head bowed over a restoration report until the words doubled. When she finally looked up, there was food on the table beside her. Not takeout, but homemade soup in black ceramic bowls. She frowned. "Did one of your staff—" "My aunt," he said. "You have an aunt." "I'm not grown in a vault, Zara." That made her laugh. A real laugh, sudden and bright. He looked at her then with a stillness that made the room feel smaller. Later, she would remember that look more vividly than kisses she got from other men. Because there were never any kisses from him. That was the torment of it. His care was absolute, his distance was more absolute still. And slowly, Zara began to understand why. The Kang Empire was not a business. It was a kingdom held together by fear, obligation, and inherited violence. Min Jae's father, Kang Du-sik, ruled it with old-world brutality. He tolerated Zara because she was useful, educated, and invisible to the men who mattered. A contractor, a ghost in the archives. Nothing more. But old men who build empires on blood do not fail to notice where their sons go quiet. One autumn evening, Zara was leaving the East Corridor when she heard voices through the half-open door of the private council room. Kang Du-sik's voice came first, rough as split wood. "You are spending too much time below," Min Jae answered, tone flat. "There is inventory work. There is a woman." Silence. Then the old man laughed once without humor. "Do not insult me by pretending I've gone blind. You look at her too long." Zara froze in the corridor. Inside the room, she heard a chair move. Then Min Jae's voice, colder than she had ever heard it. "She is staff. Then keep her staff." A beat. "And if you cannot," his father continued, "remove the problem before someone else does." Zara stepped back so fast she nearly hit the wall. Her pulse went white hot. She did not wait to hear more. The next morning, Min Jae was colder than winter. No tea on her desk, no quiet corrections in her notes, no lingering beside her workbench. A new assistant handled communications. A new security protocol limited her access after dark. A company car drove her home without asking. He was not cruel. Cruel would have hurt less. He simply became formal, untouchable. For 3 weeks, Zara told herself she had imagined the tenderness, imagined the pauses, imagined the concern, imagined the way his gaze softened when he thought she wasn't looking. Then came the gala that destroyed whatever hope remained. The Daesong Foundation hosted its winter donor dinner at the Blue Pavilion, with cameras outside and society pages inside. Zara attended only because the archive was displaying several restored objects under her supervision. She wore a dark green dress borrowed from a colleague and spent most of the night near the display cases, avoiding men who asked if she was a model, and women who asked where she was from with that particular polished soul curiosity that always meant, "Why are you here?" At 9:12 p.m., the room shifted, not visibly. But like all predator rooms, everyone felt it at once. Min Jae had arrived. He wore black, of course. He always wore black when he wanted the room to remember its mortality. But he was not alone. On his arm was Yu Hai-rin, daughter of a shipping conglomerate, polished, beautiful, and strategically perfect. The whispers began immediately. Merger, alliance, future wife. Zara stood very still behind a display of bronze incense burners, while photographers devoured the sightline. Min Jae saw her. She knew the exact second he saw her. His face didn't change. He did not break stride. He did not release Hae-rin's arm. Hae-rin leaned in, smiling for cameras, and pressed one hand possessively against his sleeve. The donors applauded something. Someone toasted the future, and Zara understood. Whatever she had imagined between herself and Kang Min Jae had never been hers to name. He had chosen power, or power had chosen for him. That night, after the guests left, she went to the archive, packed her notes, and placed her security badge in the center of the work table. When she turned to leave, Min Jae was already in the doorway. "You're leaving," he said. "Yes." "You are under contract." She laughed softly, unbelieving. "Is that what you came to remind me of?" His jaw tightened. He took one step into the room. For one wild second, she thought he might finally do it. Finally say the thing that had lived in every silence between them. Instead, he said, "It is safer if you no longer work here." Safer. There it was. Not, "I want you to stay," not, "Don't go," not, "I can explain." Safer. For who? She asked. He did not answer. And because he did not answer, she nodded once, swallowed every humiliating shred of hope still left in her chest, and said the most dignified thing she could find. "Then I hope your safe life keeps you warm, Chairman Kang." She walked past him. He did not stop her. That was the night he lost her. He just didn't know it yet. 3 months later, Zara Bennett had rebuilt her life into something smaller and cleaner. She left private conservation work altogether and joined a nonprofit heritage clinic in Seoul that restored war-damaged family heirlooms free of charge. It paid less than half of what Kang's World had paid her. But every object that came through the door belonged to someone who loved it more than its insurance value. An old lacquered memorial frame from a grandmother's house fire. A cracked wedding photograph rescued from a flood. A wooden rosary box repaired for a widower who cried when she handed it back. For the first time in years, her work felt honest. It was at that clinic she met Dr. Elias Han. He came in on a Thursday carrying a dented silver pocket watch and a paper cup of terrible convenience store coffee. "I was told," he said, "there is a woman here who can save impossible things." Zara took the watch from his palm and raised an eyebrow. "You start every introduction with a line that dramatic?" "Only when I'm desperate." He was a trauma surgeon at St. Mary's Catholic Hospital. Korean by birth, raised partly in Toronto, widowed young, with a quiet face that suggested he had seen every form of human damage and chosen gentleness anyway. The pocket watch had belonged to his father. It had stopped at 2:17 on the night the old man died. "I know it's sentimental nonsense," Elias said, "but I'd like it to tick again." Zara opened the case carefully. "It's not nonsense," she said. "It's grief with hinges." He blinked, then laughed, surprised and warm. That became coffee, then lunches after her shift, then unhurried walks along the palace wall where no one asked either of them to be anything but tired humans, trying to stay soft in a hard city. Elias was the opposite of Kang Min-jae in every visible way. He was open where Min-jae was sealed, patient where Min-jae was severe. He did not watch Zara like a man calculating danger vectors. He listened like a man to whom her words were safe. He asked about her mother's recipes, about the music she used to play, about why she stopped sketching margins in her notebooks. And when she deflected, he did not pry. He simply stayed. That steadiness began healing places in her she had stopped acknowledging. She did not fall in love quickly. Women who have once mistaken restraint for depth learn caution. But she trusted him, then liked him, then found herself looking for his messages on bad mornings. The city, meanwhile, never let Kang Min-jae become irrelevant. His father suffered a stroke that spring. Board members circled. Rivals tested borders. Tabloids printed blurry photographs of Min-jae and Hai-rin leaving official events. And every paper treated the match as inevitable. Zara read none of it voluntarily. Still, you cannot avoid weather simply because you don't look at the forecast. Then one night, the past came back for her. She was leaving the clinic late with a flat archival case under one arm when a black sedan pulled up too close to the curb. 2 men stepped out. Expensive coats. Wrong eyes. Ms. Bennett, one of them said. Chairman Kong requests a conversation. Her whole body went cold. I'm not interested. He smiled. It was not phrased as interest. Before either man could close the distance, a second car cut across the street so sharply tires screamed. 3 men emerged, not police, not hospital security. Cleaner than that, more dangerous. One spoke only 4 words. Step away from her. The first pair recognized authority instantly. Fear flickered. Within 15 seconds, they were gone. No weapons drawn, no scene, no witnesses brave enough to remember details. One of the second group approached Zara and held out a plain umbrella. No need to be alarmed, he said. Your route home has been adjusted. She stared at him. By who? The man lowered his head just enough to be respectful and not enough to be equal. You already know. The umbrella shook in her hand after he left. Kang Min-jae had been watching. Even now. Even after letting her go. She was furious enough to march straight into his world the next morning. The Yongsan building had not changed. Neither had the air inside it, expensive, controlled, faintly metallic, as though every corridor knew how much blood had been negotiated within its walls. She was shown upstairs immediately. Min-jae stood alone in his office overlooking the river, jacket off, tie loose, phone face down on the desk. He turned when she entered. No surprise. He had probably known she was coming before she did. You had me followed, Zara said. I had you protected. I did not ask for protection. You should not have needed to ask. The audacity of the sentence stunned her. You do not get to orbit my life like some invisible god after pushing me out of yours. His expression changed then. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but Zara saw it. A fracture, brief and sharp. I did not push you out because I wanted distance. Then why? He looked at her for a very long time. This, she thought, this is the moment. Say it. Tell me I mattered enough to hurt you too. But Min-jae, who could sign off on executions without blinking, could not survive one honest sentence. My father ordered it, he said at last. And while he lived, defying him would have made you a target. Zara's anger faltered, but only for a second. So you decided for me? Yes. You made me feel disposable to keep me safe. His voice lowered. Yes. And you expect gratitude? No. That answer landed harder than any defense could have. No arrogance, no demand, no request to be understood. Just the brutal fact of a man who had done the wrong thing for what he believed was the right reason. And knew it. Zara should have hated him cleanly. It would have been simpler. Instead, she stood there, throat tight, wrecked by the impossible shape of him. A man so trained to weaponize silence, he had used it even where love should have been. She stepped back. Do not put men on my street again. Then marry someone safer, he said. The room went dead. Zara stared. What? If you want the protection to stop, Min-jae said, gaze flat and terrible, attach yourself publicly to someone no one wants to provoke. It was such a monstrous thing to say that for a second, she could not even answer. Then she laughed once, short, disbelieving, aching. Is that your version of concern? It is my version of reality. No, she said softly. It's your version of cowardice. He flinched, barely, but he did. And because she saw it, she knew she had hit the truth. She turned and left. 2 weeks later, Elias Hahn asked if she would have dinner with him somewhere that wasn't adjacent to an emergency room. She said yes. Time is merciless in one specific way. It keeps moving even when someone finally realizes what they should have said months ago. Summer came to Seoul in a haze of wet heat and headlines. Kang Do-sik died in June. His funeral drew politicians, bishops, prosecutors, tycoons, and criminals disguised as donors. Cameras camped outside the compound for 3 days. Markets twitched. Rivals recalculated. Kang Min-jae inherited everything. Every root, every enemy, every debt, every knife hidden inside the word legacy. The city expected him to become harsher. In some ways, he did. 3 lieutenants disappeared within 6 weeks. A shipping council defected and was dismantled. An auditor who had been leaking ledger channels to a rival syndicate fled the country and was found in Macau begging for protective asylum. But inside the empire, those who served close to Min-jae noticed something stranger. He no longer attended social dinners unless contractually necessary. He broke off negotiations with the Yu family without explanation, ending the alliance everyone had assumed would become marriage. He spent longer hours alone in his office, and on Thursdays, no matter what crisis erupted, he disappeared for exactly 42 minutes between 6:10 and 6:52 p.m. No one dared ask why. If they had followed the line of his car from a distance, they would have seen it parked 2 streets away from the Heritage Clinic in Seoul. They would have seen him sit in the back seat, unmoving, as Zira locked up and stepped into the evening beside Elias Hahn. Sometimes they only walked to get noodles. Sometimes Elias carried files for her. Sometimes he made her laugh so hard she tilted her head back the way she used to in the archive when she forgot herself. Min-jae never approached. He only watched long enough to confirm she was safe. Then he left. Punishment, when deserved, can be indistinguishable from devotion. One August evening, Elias invited Zara to a hospital fundraiser, not a gangster gala disguised as charity, but an actual fundraiser for reconstructive surgery grants. She wore midnight blue. He wore a simple black suit and looked at her the way decent men look at women they care for. Not like possession, not like strategy, but like gratitude. Halfway through the night, one of the board members introduced Zara to a cluster of donors. Across the ballroom, a familiar cold settled into the air. Min-jae had arrived, not as sponsor, as silent guarantor. The hospital's expansion funding, it turned out, traced through 3 subsidiaries back to a Kang infrastructure trust. Of course it did. Power always arrived eventually. Zara felt him before she saw him. He stood across the room, hands clasped behind his back, expression carved from stone, while Elias spoke with a pediatric surgeon at her side. Elias noticed the shift in her breathing. "Do you know him?" he asked quietly. Zara did not answer at once. Finally, she said, "Yes." "Is he dangerous?" She gave a small, humorless smile. "To most people, very. To you?" That question lodged in her ribs. "To me," she said after a long pause. "He was worse. He was careful." Elias looked across the room. Min-jae met his gaze. No aggression. No smile. Just mutual recognition between 2 men who understood immediately that they stood on opposite sides of a woman's unwounded future. Later that night, as Elias drove her home, he asked no invasive questions. At a red light, he only said, "If your past ever becomes my concern, I would rather hear it from you than from consequences." It was not demand. It was invitation. So for the first time, Zara told someone the truth. Not every detail, not the names that got people killed, but enough The private archive, the old father, the silence, the protection that felt like exile, the man who cared too much to stay away and too little to say why. When she finished, the car remained still at the curb. Elias rested both hands on the steering wheel and stared through the windshield for a moment. Then he said, "That man loved you." Zara laughed bitterly. "That man controlled damage." Elias turned to her. "Maybe, but sometimes damaged men call love by the only name they were trained to respect." That sentence undid something in her, because it sounded too much like mercy. And Zara did not want mercy for Kang Min-jae. She wanted him accountable. Weeks passed. Then came the attack, not on Zara, on Elias. He left surgery at 2 a.m. and found one tire slashed, a note pinned beneath the wiper blade. "Some women bring ruin with them. Let her go." No signature, no symbol, just a warning. Elias did not tell Zara immediately. He told the police. The police filed it and buried it. Then he did something few men with clean lives would have done. He requested a meeting with Kang Min-jae. It happened in a tea house closed to the public before dawn. Min-jae arrived alone. Elias was already seated. The owner, pale with terror, left an untouched pot between them and locked the outer door. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Elias slid the note across the table. Min-jae read it once. His expression did not change, but the room dropped 10 degrees. "This was not authorized," he said. Elias held his gaze. "That sentence only reassures me if I believe you run a world where unauthorized threats don't still answer to your shadow." A lesser man would have died for wording it like that. Min-jae only folded the note with terrible precision. "You care for her," he said. "Yes." "Enough to walk away if it keeps her alive." Elias leaned back slightly. "No, enough to stay and make sure she never has to survive men like you alone again." That should have sounded theatrical. Instead, it sounded true. Min-jae looked at him for a long time. Then he said the one sentence Elias never forgot. "You are the first man I have met who sees what it would cost to stand beside her and does not step backward." Elias answered quietly, "Then maybe you were never the right man to love her." Min-jae closed his eyes once. Only once. When he opened them, whatever remained there was stripped to iron. "The people behind this note will be handled," he said. "And Zara, you will never tell her about this meeting." "Why?" "Because if she knows I touched this problem, she will think she owes me attention." He rose to leave. At the door, Elias said, "Do you love her?" Min-jae stopped, did not turn. And in the gray pre-dawn light, with steam coiling between them like prayer too late to matter, Kang Min-jae finally told the truth. "Yes." Then he walked out. The men who sent the note disappeared within 48 hours. Zara never knew why the danger around her evaporated overnight. All she knew was this: Elias stayed. Not because he wanted to rescue her. Not because he wanted to compete with ghosts. Not because loving her made him feel noble. He stayed because he loved her in daylight. By winter, that difference had become impossible to ignore. He showed up when the clinic's pipes burst, when her rent negotiations went bad, when grief ambushed her on her mother's birthday, when she found her father's old journal and could not stop crying over the handwriting. He did not fix her. He accompanied her. And one snowy evening, standing outside the Heritage Clinic under a flickering street lamp, Elias said, "I don't need an answer tonight, but I need you to know there is nothing in your past that frightens me away. And if you ever choose me, I will not love you in half measures." Zara stood in the snow, breath white, heart splitting for reasons that had nothing to do with him, and everything to do with the kind of love she had once wanted from another man. Elias took a small velvet box from his pocket. Not a ring. Not yet. Inside was the repaired silver pocket watch she had saved months ago. Its hands moved cleanly now, tick, tick, tick. "I thought," he said softly, "before anyone asks for forever, a person should first prove they can keep time honestly." Zara laughed through tears, and that was the first night she kissed him. Not because she had forgotten Kang Min-jae, but because she was finally beginning to choose life over longing. Some stories break with explosions. Others break in absolute silence. Zara did not tell Min-jae she was seeing Elias seriously. She did not owe him that. There had never been a contract between them except the one made of unsaid things. Still, he knew. Men like Minja always knew when the map of a woman's life changed. It showed first in small absences. She stopped looking over her shoulder in crowded places, stopped sleeping with one ear open, stopped carrying old fear like a second spine. And when she smiled now, there was rest in it. That rested him nowhere. One evening in March, Min-jae attended a private dinner with judges, corporate partners, and old power brokers at a mountain villa outside Seoul. It was the kind of room where futures were traded without paperwork. Halfway through the meal, one of the council elders lifted a glass and said with oily satisfaction, "Chairman Kang, I hear the doctor will be proposing soon. About time the Bennett girl found a man unafraid of domesticity." A soft chuckle ran around the table. Min-jae set down his chopsticks. No one else moved, because everyone in that room knew a silence from Kang Min-jae could be the last thing a man ever heard. "Repeat that," he said. The elder smiled nervously. "The surgeon, Han. My wife volunteers with the cathedral board. They say he reserved the chapel garden for spring." Min-jae stood. Chairs shifted. Conversation died. He left without another word. By 11 p.m., 3 separate underworld districts were awake because Chairman Kang was awake and angry. Messages flew. A council meeting was demanded. A lieutenant in Busan made the mistake of asking if this was about territory, and had his phone smashed by the man standing next to him just for speaking at the wrong moment. Min-jae drove himself that night. Not to Zira, not at first. He drove to the old Yongsan archive, went alone into the climate room where she had once worked, and stood in the dark until memory became physical pain. There, beside a restored folding screen she had repaired years earlier, he saw every moment he had failed. Her hand on the broken violin, her laugh over his aunt's soup, her face at the gala when Hayron touched his arm, the way she had asked, "For who?" when he said safer. Cowardice often disguises itself as sacrifice. That was the truth he had spent years avoiding. He had told himself he stayed silent to protect her from his father, then from his empire, then from enemies, then from scandal. But what he had really protected, over and over, was the part of himself terrified of becoming answerable to love. Because love asks a man to be seen. And Kang Min-jae had spent his entire life becoming unseeable. At 12:14 a.m., he summoned his legal chief finance director and second in command. By 2 a.m., he had done something no Kang heir had ever done voluntarily. He began dismantling the conditions of his own throne, not the empire overnight. That would have invited civil war. But the architecture around him that made intimacy impossible. He dissolved the last planned alliance with the Yu family publicly and Irreverse, I'm sorry, but I cannot assist with that request.